tomorrow would be good. Council members, what do you all think? I'm looking at you, the ones I can see. Are you good with that? Okay, I see thumbs up. See Barbara, and okay, I see Paul and Joe, Hack, Doris. Are you good with that? And George, are you good with that? Doris, and okay, good. I see George. Now, Doris, you good? Okay, good deal. So let's do that.
Okay. That's
Okay.
fine. Yep. Sorry about that, Andrew.
That's okay, but thank you very much for trying to get that worked out. We appreciate it. Okay.
And I have checked off. We do have a quorum. We have 11 people in the meeting right now, Twan. So we're good to approve anything that we need to approve.
Okay, perfect. And I'm not sure. I believe Mary Alice Mack might be calling in. So I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's her phone number. Who's 708-843-708-5690? Would you please unmute your line and let us know who you are?
You can press, try to press *6 to unmute yourself if that's Miss Mack.
That may be.
It might not be then.
Yeah, it might not. Okay, well, I call the meeting to order, our CPAC meeting for December 3rd to order, and it's so good to see all of you here tonight. We've got a very aggressive agenda, which is wonderful. I think we have some exciting information to share. So we're looking forward to getting that all shared up with you. Please, would you keep Max Milligan, one of our council members, in your kind, positive thoughts? Unfortunately, he experienced a fire today, and he is safe and unharmed. He is being relocated, but he will not be able to join us on tonight's call for tonight's meeting. And I have talked with him, and I am going to check with him again after the meeting is over. So please, if you're able to reach out to him, I know he would appreciate that as well. Bethany, you said you've already done the roll call?
Yes, ma'am. I've gone
Okay.
through already to see who's here.
Okay. Then we can move on to the approval of the minutes. Did everyone get a chance to look at the minutes? And Bethany, thank you so very much for the detail. That's really great. Did everyone get a chance to look at the minutes? Any corrections needed? Or is it common consent that we can approve the minutes? Or is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve, Harris.
Second.
Okay. It's been properly moved and seconded. Bethany, you got that right? That the minutes be approved from our last meeting, October 1st and October the 8th. All those in favor, please say aye or show me thumbs up.
Aye.
Aye.
Good deal, Doris. I think I heard you. Thank you, George. All right, any opposers? Good deal. Thank you very much. So those minutes are approved. This now takes us to our election of chairman and chairperson and vice chairperson discussion. I was able to get with Steve Rumelin to review our guidelines as I promised and as we discussed at our previous meeting. And again, it simply states that we are to elect a chairperson and a vice chairperson annually, so that term would start, it's a one-year term, and it would start in January. Now, of course, our next meeting will be February, but to ensure that we're able to start off on the right footing in February, we need to do an election of a chairperson and a vice chairperson. So council members, how say you? Everybody is muted. So you want to unmute? Is there a motion, or do you want the floor open for nominations? Or do you have a motion that?
Paul, let me ask you a question if you don't mind.
Sure, Paul.
Are you going to be continuing on the council?
My expectation is to continue on the council, yes.
Then I'd like to nominate you for chairman.
Oh, thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Joe. Any other nominations for chairman? None others? Okay, so then is there a motion to close on the one nomination?
Yeah, I move
Gotcha,
to
thank
close.
you. And I saw a second already. All those in favor of closing the nominations on the one name, thumbs up. Any opposers, thumbs down, and those who are not showing right now, okay, I see Doris. Okay, no opposition? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your vote of confidence, and I look forward to working along with you in the new year. The floor is now open then for vice chairman. And, now let me say that Paul, remember Paul has just recently been elected to the vice chairperson position. I think he has been in for all of 2 or 3 months. And he was finishing the unexpired term of our previous vice chairperson who had to resign due to some work commitments. And Paul, are you available would you be willing to?
I'm available unless
Be
somebody
elected?
much better than me and much more qualified, which is most of these people are, interested in doing it. I don't mind. Yeah, I enjoy it.
Okay,
I'd like
okay.
to nominate Paul if he is willing, yes. Mhm.
Thanks, Hank.
Is there a second on that nomination?
Second.
Thanks, Ryan. Got you. Any other nominations for vice chairperson? Sounds like Paul, that's it. So is there a close on the nominations?
So moved.
So moved. Thank you, Jerry. Is there a second on closing the nominations? Thank you, Joe. Any discussion? All those in favor of Paul Tamburino serving as our vice chairperson for 2021? Look at the thumbs already up. Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you. George, you good? On the nomination of, okay, got you. I think I saw everybody. Peter, I saw your thumb before, right? Good deal. Gotcha. Okay, then I don't see anyone left to do opposition. So Paul, congratulations. You're a vice chairperson. We in it to win it and continue rolling for the next year. Thank you, members, for expeditiously moving through that particular agenda item. And Steve, I want to thank you again. Steve Romelin, thank you again for your assistance in ensuring that we are appropriately interpreting the guidelines that the city council has provided for us to follow. Now, for the citizens participation period, Bethany informed me earlier today that we didn't have any citizens who wanted to speak with us on tonight. Bethany, is that still the condition?
That's correct. I put that link up on the website last Thursday afternoon, I think, and I didn't get any requests by phone, email, or on that website, and there were no comments left either.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, members of the community that are out there in YouTube land, as well as those that may have dialed in to join us tonight, if you have any comments or any questions or concerns that you want to provide to us, even following this meeting, please feel free to send it in to that website address or to send it in to Bethany or to send it into any of our email addresses that you have. We look forward to hearing any input that you provide because again, we are a citizens council trying to assist to ensure that we work on harmonious relationships, improving relationships between the communities in which we serve and the police department. Now we're at our subcommittee reports, and I am really excited because we have gotten 3 subcommittees that have really been busy working since our October meeting and even before. So for the traffic stop committee, Joe Lysett is going to respond to us and report. For communications, Paul Tamburino will report. They are both the chairman for those 2 subcommittees respectively. And for the policies and procedures committee, instead of Max Milligan presenting, Jerome Harris is going to present to us tonight. So, Mr. Lysett, would you please present your report for the traffic stop committee? I think you're on mute. Yeah, Joe, you're on mute. Joe, would you unmute and start over?
How about
There
that?
you go.
Yeah. Okay. The first part of it, I was just asking for funds for that committee so we could party, but I'll hold off on that. Before I get into the report, I would be remiss if I did not extend my appreciation to Ryan Davis for stepping up when I tried to figure out how I could correct all of the errors that I had on my computer before it completely just disintegrated. He gave me the best advice in the world, and he said, "Joe, I think it's time you get a new computer." So, Ryan, I did that, okay? But he did a really good job, and some of it we had discussed before. All of you should have received this report, I believe, but if you didn't, you'll notice that the action items that we completed, some of them were sort of a extension of our previous meetings. But for the first time, I got to tell you now, I feel that we now have a venue to work off of. Ladies and gentlemen, when I first came on the committee, council, excuse me, I had some reservations because quite frankly, we were putting an awful lot of roadblocks in front of the Charleston Police Department. They have a job, they have an agenda, they have the trainings, they have the platforms, they had all of this. But the one ingredient that we wanted to talk about, we never did, and we never got to it, and that was the public. Traffic stops are critical along with everything else. But as I read through everything, including the bias report, racial bias audit, excuse me, and 64 pages of thousands of words, it still appears to me that what we asked for and what we're being given now in the traffic stop committee is exactly what we need so that we can digest and establish via the council input to the community. We need to get the people involved. The police department is doing a heck of a job training everybody they can, but we need to get the people involved. We need their input. I'm strongly against trying to make any kind of recommendations for anything based on some written documents by a third party. And I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings, but my whole career in the last 50 years has been based on, give me the facts, give me an opportunity to digest them, let me ask some questions. Now we have that, and I'm very grateful, for the captain for getting the information to us. And you see those 7 items, all of them are very, very, very important. The sequence that they're listed has nothing to do with the priority. There's certainly no doubt about it that we need to consider the multicultural for law enforcement. That's got to be we got to get away from the old 30s and 40s. We got to get up with this. And the way to do that is to utilize the fact that we are multicultural. But how many people realize that we are? Most recently, Chief Reynolds acknowledged the promotion of a couple of African Americans who were qualified. They weren't promoted because they were African Americans, but because they were qualified. That's a big difference. And the thing of it is, when we now can go into I thought the communications report was exceptional because it took that ingredients that they had there and I married it into the traffic stop. And I now realize that there's some things we could do through traffic stops to parallel and support the communications. As far as the procedures are there. They're in place. Most of you, if not all of you, have taken Policing 101. The only thing that we're hampered with right now is we can't get the ride-alongs. You can't beat practical experience. There's an old saying, you can't tell a book by its cover. So you can read that racial bias report, audit. You can reach the different reports that have been put out. And some of the narration is great. Some of it creates questions, and a lot of it could be addressed if you could just be there, if you could just go through it. I still have flashbacks of my time in the training when we were in the garage and the guy came out there with a knife. And, I immediately reverted back to my days in Vietnam. So I can appreciate on a traffic stop what a police officer is looking at. And the first thing is always their safety and the safety of the citizen. But the citizens don't perceive that. And so I feel that one of the things that we will really tackle on traffic stops, and we're going to go into the community. We've got to get them to understand that the police department cares about them. We're just not stopping them to be stopping them. You know, the question came up about a busted headlight. Can you advise them yeah, you got a bad headlight and we're going to give you this warning ticket, but that's just a reminder so you can get it done. Could you take it a step further and say, but by the way, now, I'm not sure where you live, but any advanced store or auto, whatever, etc., they've got it, they'll do it, they'll pop it in for you and that kind of stuff like that. We gotta establish a rapport with the community, even in a traffic stop. And I want to be there. I know Ryan does. And I'm sure that the rest of the committee feels the same way. I want to be there. I want to hear what they say. I want to see how they react. I mean, when I was on that first ride along, we were in a couple of hot spots and the officer did an exceptional job. He was, in my opinion, sometimes he was a little bit too little, because if there's a sign that says stop, it doesn't stand for skid tires on the pavement. It means stop. And you don't roll through stop signs. And consequently, that generates accidents. So all in all, I think a lot of the information that was available and is being done, we want to verify it. I want to verify it. Okay. I want to verify it so I can come in your community, to your social club, to whenever and say, listen, I've seen it. When they approach the car, they introduce themselves. They're very polite. You know, even if it's pouring down rain or whatever, they're not abrasive. They're not rude, crude, and socially unacceptable. They're there to talk to you about the possibility of the violation and what occurred, how it occurred, why it occurred. And if a ticket's necessary, then the ticket's going to have to be given. I did get a packet from, is it Ms. Stivers, I believe? Is that where we got it from, Ryan? Okay. And we got the hot spots on there, and we show the map of West Ashley and things of that nature. And that's really very good for talking points. But I'm hoping that the traffic stop committee can take the steps forward, utilizing the information that the communications committee has provided to get out in the community. We have got to start knocking on some doors and visiting some social clubs and garden clubs and choir groups, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and school program. It doesn't matter. We've got to be there and we got to talk to them. We got to let them, we're not politicians. We got to let them know what's going on. Question.
Joe, that's what I was going to ask you. I saw the presentation that you all had, Captain Quintella or Wendy Cyrus sent it out to all of us to look at. And that's an excellent PowerPoint presentation. Is that available? Are we able to share that with the community? Or Captain Quintella, do we need to, or Chief Reynolds, do we need to hold off on sharing that with the community?
We can share that.
Chief, you've got a bad echo with you. Stop it.
I would only ask if you may put some context behind it, as in a voiceover for some slides to get
Tony,
more contextual information and
Yeah, Captain
what
Quintella.
it is.
Tony, you're gonna have to reconnect. Your connection is terrible.
Yeah, we can't hear anything you're
Can't
saying.
get you or the chief.
Yeah,
Are you-
and while he's reconnecting, Jerry, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, you indicated that Wendy circulated the data that was shared with the traffic committee. I don't recall seeing that, so I'd appreciate getting a copy of the
PowerPoint
presentation.
presentation? I
Mhm.
thought that went to everybody. Okay. Well, and I'm asking now when Captain Quintella comes back on, find out if that's something, that would be, that's the presentation that Joe's talking about.
You're talking
And
about
Joe,
citizens.
since we have some people, Joe, since we have some people who've called in and I'm not sure they are privy to the 7 items that you all discussed in the meeting, Would you please just read those 7 items out? It's under your actions completed.
Right, I sure will. Question,
Thank you.
question though, are you talking about the citizens interaction and traffic stop?
PowerPoint presentation, yes,
PowerPoint, yeah.
right.
I felt like, I'm agreeing with you. I felt like it was very applicable, but of course, I think we need to get the clearance from the CPD as to whether or not we can put that information out to the world, okay?
Right.
The
Yeah,
seven
can you hear
items-
me? Swan, can you hear me?
Now I can, yes,
Yeah.
sir.
I'll let Tony add more context, but I think what he was trying to say is that we absolutely want to do that. He wants to polish it up a little bit, and because Arthur Lee and I think Lieutenant McFadden and others added value in their presentation, he would do a voiceover and just make it something that would be of value. And yes, to get that out, to produce kind of a professional product, and something that could go out to all of the faith community, all the different community groups that Joe listed. And the answer is yes, we can get that out. We'll help expedite that and get it in a format that is reproducible and shareable and adds the context that you also heard besides just the PowerPoint.
Perfect.
Yeah. Chief, let me ask you this.
Thank you, sir.
Would you consider the possibility of that PowerPoint presentation being sent out in the format of a podcast?
That would be
Yes,
great.
I think we can do a whole variety of different things with that. I think it's an important topic. I think there's a lot of families and churches and community groups that have a lot of interest in how we do traffic stops, why we do them, what to expect, all the things that you mentioned with safety protocols, and why we do what we do, and the standard that we hold ourselves to, and training, and all those things that you went over.
Yeah.
And making it fairly concise. And yes, we can do some things like that where we ask and answer questions, all the above. I think we need to get creative and kind of embrace the new technology, and podcast is one of many ways of doing that.
I have found great success with that. I hate to borrow from another national organization, but the American Legion has always suffered in trying to contact 2.4 million people. It's just something about trying to get them all on the screen at one time that doesn't work. So they went to using podcasts for memberships, for different programs, and it was amazing. The measurement came back, and it came back through their responses and or contributions and or purchases and or volunteering for different things. And I'm just thinking if we did that in Charleston, people at their leisure would have a chance to look at it, hear it, read it or whatever, digest it, think about it, come back to it, and then maybe be able to come back to this council and say, hey, listen, what about this? What about that? You know, so that'd be great. I personally, I appreciate that. As far as
And Joe, if
I think
we,
it's a
Chief,
good
if we make it
suggestion.
available, Chief, if it's made available to the community at large, could the last slide where it says questions, could that slide have an info, an email address where if citizens had a question, they'd have someone they could email their question to regarding traffic stops?
Yes.
well, didn't the communications committee mention the possibility, Brittany, you might remember about a web page or
Actually, Joe, that's a wonderful lead in to the communications subcommittee report. If there are no additional questions for the traffic stop subcommittee, we thank you so much for that very detailed and great report. We'll move on to the communications subcommittee because Joe's given us a wonderful lead in, and Paul Tamburino will then share with us the communications subcommittee work.
Hey, good evening, everybody, and thanks for allowing me to present this. I've submitted my report in the minutes from the subcommittee in writing, so I'm not gonna repeat everything that you can read. So I want to go ahead and give you some highlights of it. Primarily what we did is we got back together for our second meeting, and we all came to the table with some recommendations, having reviewed the audit as it relates to communications. Wendy was really good about doing a review of that. So in our first meeting, what we asked Wendy to do is the whole idea of not wanting to recreate the wheel and maybe getting some feedback from other advisory committees, you know, around the country that are doing the same thing and have a similar mission than what we do. So Wendy reached out to several citizen groups around the country. So at our last meeting, we actually got to meet with a group from Dayton, Ohio, Portland, Oregon, Greenville, South Carolina, and we got a lot of good information from them. And what we did is we saw that there's a variety. There's a variety of folks, that committees that are formed for similar reasons, but you know, some of them are historically more in the oversight. So they have citizens committees that were in a role that we do not have. And it's not our charter to be an oversight. We do not, you know, we may have involvement on the advisory side, but we're not reviewing the policies and procedures and making actual decisions. We're not listening to the grievances. We're not sitting in on disciplinary measures. And in Greenville, they do have that in place. So we shared some of our information. We received information back. I think one of the big things that I think we all took from it, one of the, you know, in Greenville, is they did a citizen survey. So they weren't sitting here in an echo chamber just talking to each other about what we think is best. What they did is they put together a survey and took back responses over a 2-week period. And they said it was the greatest response rate they'd ever had. They had about 2,000 to 3,000 responses. And so they were able to collate that data, put together some information that helped drove the actions of their citizens council. So, you know, it wasn't a group of people like us just sitting here saying, well, you know, let's either take our lead from the department or, you know, our own thoughts. It was actually being engaged in with the community. And really that's the role of our committee, is to make sure that we're not just talking to ourselves, that we're actually going out and fulfilling our purpose, that we do represent citizens. And so we are listening to them. So that was I think it was a great meeting. I think everybody, you know, I think everybody got something out of it, because I know we were all pretty engaged in it. You know, I'm pretty fortunate that our subcommittee has 4 people, and then, you know, the other 3 are a lot more experienced than I am. And, you know, the questions they brought to the table, it was pretty good. I mean, I think we challenged them pretty well. They challenged us. So we got some good feedback that's included in my report and my minutes. The other piece that we did is we then said, okay, based on the audit, you know, as it relates to communications, let's come up with some ideas of what we think we as a CPAC, not as a subcommittee, but we as a CPAC should be doing to increase our communications, to make sure that we are a citizens council and not just a group of people talk to each other. So each of us put together a list. We put them into a format of a Word document. Yeah, I apologize. They were sent out to y'all, I guess, today. That happens. That's life. Everybody's busy, and, you know, no worries. So what I'd like everybody to do is go through that list. What we did is, you know, we each took our own ideas, and some of them may come across as a little bit redundant, which is good, which means some of us are on the same train of thought, and nothing we're doing is rocket science. You're going to look at our recommendations and say, well, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, yeah, of course. So what I'm going to ask each of the committee members, the council members, to do is, over the next couple of weeks, take that report that Bethany sent out today, look at our recommendations. And what I'd like you to do is, by Friday the 18th, if you would send back to me, I'll put all the data back together. So send me your comments, your concerns on whether it's general or to specific points. And then what I'd like you to do is go through there and just put a number next to each of them as our priority, because you're going to see on there's about 30 or 40 different things. We can't do 30 or 40 different things at once. So what we want to do is prioritize. You know, when we look at prioritizing, you know, you want to have value. So sometimes it's bang for the buck. How can we get a fast value? Some of them may be more long-term. So if you would prioritize those, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect that data, and I'll put it in spreadsheets and do all that other nonsense. I'll share the results with the subcommittee so we all can go back and forth with it. And then what I want to be able to do with our next subcommittee meeting is we all meet and say, okay, based on what the council's told us, here are our priorities. Let's develop an action plan so that we can present an executable action plan at the next meeting for you all to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I'm really, we don't need to debate for the next 3 years. We need to start moving. And so our plan is to give you an execution for you to say thumbs up or thumbs down. And so I am asking each of you, I know the next couple of weeks are pretty busy, but all of y'all are at home. So just take a few minutes for me. I appreciate it. Probably starting Thursday or Friday, I'll start, next week, I'll start hounding you. Some people are going to be good at it, better than others, but I would like to see everybody reply back, because each of us has a charter from our representative that appointed us or the mayor appointed us to be involved, and communication is our #1 priority. Okay. So I'm really looking at making sure that we have something in front of you. And some of these things are going to be valuable to you. I'll give you an example of one. I think a no-brainer. The CPAC committee members should have a CPAC email rather than using your personal email. And I believe in the digest. The community, I'd love to see citizens be able to have a central email address to voice a concern to us, that each of us gets our own copy of it, and we can review that over time rather than waiting for what questions come up at a meeting. Okay, so simple things like that on how we can have quick bang for the buck, immediate results that we can then turn around and provide results. The other second highlight you're going to see in there, and it's an important one that I think is, in my opinion, I think the CPAC should have, we have a chairperson. We should empower either our chair or whether she designates a spokesperson as different things come up in the community, different events, whether it's a crisis comes up, there's a shooting, there's problems. We're a CPAC. We should have a representative who's meeting with the media, who's a point of contact. While I understand that the department has their own communication chair, we'd like our spokesperson to work with them, but we are not a voice of the police department. We're a voice of the citizenry. And while we work hand in hand, we need to be seen as independent and also as a resource so that we can show that this is not just some closed door group that's got a rubber stamp. Okay. So you'll see some of those recommendations. I'm not begging of you. I'm kind of demanding of you. Please get that information back to me, because that's our job. That's pretty much what I have. Does anybody have any questions for me, or do any of the other subcommittee members want to jump in and throw anything in that I may have missed? I will point out one thing. This is something that I think it's communications. Jerry and I'm actually I'm gonna turn on Jerry and put him on the spot because I like doing it to Jerry. Jerry and I actually volunteered to sit in on an international conference call about a week ago, and that's communications. I mean, we're a resource, and I think it was an amazing. It was to see the countries of people represented on this call. The questions they asked us was incredible. Jerry, would you mind giving just a quick overview of what we did?
Sure. There were probably about 14 to 15 folks calling in from countries including Pakistan, Brazil, Venezuela, Rwanda, South Africa, spread around the world. Many of them senior officials in their governments, and others working in not-for-profit or NGO situations. And basically what we did was describe the history and function of CPAC, talked about the audit and how it as a instrument worked. Then we got into this discussion about how, and we responded to their questions about concerns regarding oversight and transparency in policing and accountability. For me, what transpired, their questions forced me at least to think about what we do in an international context, and recognize that the structures that we have in place and the procedures do lend to perhaps more transparency and accountability, but there are areas that should be. And Paul and I exchange. We don't see everything the same way, and that came across. And I think that was helpful in terms of them folks getting an understanding of how a group like ours works, different perspectives, different experiences, and then working together. Those working together to improve the outcomes in public safety and law enforcement.
Yeah, I think it was really important. Jerry and I did have different perspectives on a lot of things, and I think it's important for us to own that. The two people can look at the same thing through two different sets of glasses and see two different things, and it's still the same action, and that's happening all around us. The other thing that was really, I've worked, guys, on a personal note. I've worked around the world, not just in the military, but the civilian world, and I go to some of these countries that these people live in. And some of the questions they were asking us, we have to remember, some of them live in police states where the oppression that they have, they want to know, are police going up and down the street beating people for not wearing masks or social distancing? That was an actual question that we got. Are people being picked up off the streets for not social distancing and related to COVID? We got asked a lot about, they wanted to know because where they live, the police departments are also private militias. And the police, I know in certain countries I've been in where, I can just give you an example of in Mexico. I knew which department, if I saw lights behind me, they have different police forces. I knew which ones to stop my car for and which ones to cock my weapon and be ready to run. And they all have police on the side of their car. So these are people living in that environment, and you think of some of the things that people in our country are feeling towards our police department. Some of the negative things when something bad happens. It's very similar to what these people are feeling in their countries. So if you've never participated in something like that, I really encourage it. And guys from the force, if you've never seen some of those types of police departments and what they're dealing with, it's a good opportunity for you as well, because it's really an eye-opener. You sitting in Charleston, you don't learn and know everything about policing. Go to one of those countries and you'll see the opposite side of it. So it's a learning experience for everybody. And I really appreciate being involved in that. It was a great, and it was a UN thing. So I mean, it wasn't some made up. This was a UN chartered event group. So it was pretty cool.
Thank you, Paul, for you and Jerry sharing that with us. That was as a result of the email that I sent out to everyone. We got a request to see if any of us would be able to participate. And fortunately, Paul and Jerry were able to join in and share on that call. And I am really happy you were able to share with us some feedback from that call. So we see that all over our world, people are having the same concerns that we are having here in Charleston. And so this is really the perfect time. This is the right time to be able to make things happen. So thank you so very much for sharing that. Any questions? I know you just received the audit points from the communication subcommittee, but Paul was asking if you had any questions. Does anyone have any questions about that handout? Joe, you're muted.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Paul, what
Yes,
is, you have on the last page, item 7, other, you have established a critical incident alert protocol with the CPD. Can you address that a little bit more for me or the council?
Okay, so what this kind of actually came from, I think we all think about it, but one of the departments that we were working with, I think, if I'm not wrong, I think it was Portland. They actually have kind of like a spokesperson. So they've got an emergency response team within their advisory group, so that, let's just use a hypothetical of a shooting. Okay, there's an officer related shooting, citizen, civil rights or whatever. Okay. So rather than, we meet every 2 or 3 months, right? What this is having a team of reactionary, so 2 or 3 members of the council who are able to, have a call, have coordination with the police department to be able to say, hey, this happened. I think, Twan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what the guy said is, they help fashion some of the communications that go out to press releases, so that, if something happened and the chief, his team needs to send out a press release to the community, they run it by their version of the CPAC to make sure the wording, it's more, how is the community going to react? Because remember, they're looking at things from their perspective, and it's not a bad idea to have, we're not a devil's advocate, but we can give a different perspective. Okay, so it doesn't look like, we don't want their communication to look like they're on the defensive. So we can help them fashion communication. That's a quick response. It's not us going on the scene of whatever happened. It's us being a media resource and saying, okay, yes, we do know about it. We are informed about it. As an advisory group, we take that under advisement. Here's our involvement in these things, and helping his department work on their communications. And so I think that's what we meant by critical incident alert protocol.
Okay, so basically, CPAC would have under the chairman's oversight, but we'd have a group of 1 or 2 or 3 people, whatever, who would be on in a situation like that. We'd be able to give, as a voice of the citizens, a unbiased and unpresidential I can't talk anymore.
Prejudicial.
Yeah, thank you. Too many glasses of wine. No, that's not it. But we would be able to provide for the citizens' point of view, because we're not on the police department. We have no oversight. We're an advisory group of individuals appointed by respected people in the community and on the council. So I was hoping that's the way I was reading that.
Yeah,
it would be something of that nature, because again, I borrow my 23 years in the American Legion. We have that in our districts. We have 20 districts in the state. Besides the district commander and the adjutant, there's one other person that can speak for that district if an event occurs of any. Usually ours are not confrontational or anything of that nature, but we want to get it to the media. And sometimes the media sensationalizes a lot of things. We all know that. They can jump from A to Z real quick, skipping 24 letters. So I think that's a great idea.
It's to show that we're a living, breathing thing. We're not just a group that meets every couple of months.
Yeah.
We're not here in oversight. And so it's not something we're going to communicate that, hey, we're going to go investigate that on behalf of the citizens. We don't do that. But
We've got one more question we've got another question from Frank.
Paul, I want to make sure I understand this. You're saying that there's a critical incident, something happens, a shooting or whatever, and all of us are involved in a shooting. And we, the Citizens Police Council, are going to look at that, and we're going to put something in writing about how we look at that from a citizen's point of view. Is that correct?
No, and I apologize if that's not coming across. No, what we want to do is we want to I think the goal would be, and any of the subcommittee members can correct me. What we want to be able to do is say, hey, we're kind of your representatives. We're here, we're not investigating anything, but we're here to hear your concerns, because a lot of times without somebody standing at the microphone to represent citizens, you have anybody that wants to, who stands up, and the loudest voice always wins. And we want to be able to be almost like a receiving. So we want people to have their voices, but we also want them to know that we're also a channel to make their voices heard with the department. Okay.
So we're asking people after an incident to talk to us. Is that what it is?
Jerry, go ahead.
So my sense of it is, one, if there is a critical incident, that there's a process by which the police department gets the members of the council information in a fashion so that if we get questioned, all right, we at least have the basic information. That's one function. The other function can be if the police department feels comfortable or feels a need to have, as Paul suggests, some input in terms of wording and communication and validation, that we're in a position to do that. That would be the small working group. But my interest is in seeing that the council is informed when there is an incident, all right, that perhaps might be of some major concern for the community, and that we're in a position to be informed.
Maybe I was listening to it wrong, Paul. What I was hearing was it sounded almost like we would be taking a position. If something we put out is contrary to what the officer says, we're going to have friction. We're going to have a lawyer on one side saying that your counsel says the officer did something wrong or didn't do something right. You know, I'm very leery of anything that we put out.
No, that's
Right, and
not.
it wouldn't be that.
No,
It would-
no,
it
we have
wouldn't be
no
that.
intention of, we're not an investigative. We're not here to give our opinion. We're here to be receivers of information, to let them know that there is a purpose why we exist. We were created for that purpose. And I think what Jerry pointed out, so, a little bit, more and around why it was created is incidents happen between our meetings. And a lot of times we don't know about it. And if we're truly the representatives of our district and from the mayor, and we don't know about it because we weren't informed, as a council,
Okay?
how do you go back and respond to it? And Jerry, I think that was, you and I had that discussion.
Yeah, that's
A
basically,
couple times.
yeah,
Okay.
it's just a procedure.
Hey, excuse me. This is Matt Austin. I was sort of curious about how y'all envision that working. I'm still new to this. I was just like, if an incident occurs, how are y'all envisioning, and when is the police department supposed to share information with us? I just wonder about ongoing investigations and, the timing of it all and what rises to the level of what they need to talk to us about. I'm curious what the criteria is.
Okay, Matt, let me jump in. And actually, we're going to hear some of that later on tonight's agenda, where the chief is going to give us some updates on where they are with the after action report from the incident that happened on May 30th and 31st. So really the intention is that it's more in line with exactly with what Jerry said, was that the protocol, the police department has a protocol. But we want to make sure that involved in that protocol is included that if they're putting out a public statement to the citizens, to the community at large, that they have the ability to share that statement maybe with the members of CPAC, so we could give them an idea on what how the community might interpret what they're saying. Many times we think, just like right now, I'm listening and we think we're saying one thing, but it comes across as meaning something different. So that would be the opportunity for the chief and his staff to share with us as citizens in the community to get a feel for what will the community think if we put this statement out based upon what the incident was that occurred. So it wouldn't be,
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, it
I
wouldn't
mean,
be
we're like a
CPAC.
round table of different perspectives, different voices,
Right.
and providing him as a resource to them, so that the communications are given that spotlight before they're sent out and reactions happen. It's like a feedback.
Any other things? Thank you, Paul and Jerry and Matt. Any other questions that we have? Thanks, Frank and Joe, for bringing those items up too. Any other questions you have for the list? And of course, if you have any questions following the meeting, please feel free to get in touch with Paul. He's the chairman for the Communication Subcommittee. And the other members of the committee are Jerry Harris, myself, with Paul, and Wendy is on the committee with us as well.
And Hack.
And Hack, that's right. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay.
I just have one concern listening to this, and this is a very, very, very sticky area. It reminds me of a kid's party game gossip, when you pass information from one person to the next, to the next, to the next. Gets to the end, it resembles absolutely nothing that it started with. So accuracy in this situation has got to be 100%. And when we start passing information from our committee to the public, to the citizens, and they in turn pass it on, and the media gets involved, there are so many opportunities for error. I'm not saying let's don't do it. I'm just saying We got to do it right. It's got to be 100% accurate. It can't be anything less. And whatever the police department passes on to us has got to be presented as we received it.
Thanks, Hack. And I think really the disconnect is many of us on tonight's call have not gotten a chance to read through the actual recommendations, and Paul was trying to summarize them. I'll put them in a little nutshell to share, but there's a lot of information there. So again, as Paul asked, please take a look at the recommendations that you received today and bounce them against the audit points that Wendy sent us previously from the brief that she gave us back in our October meeting. And please send back to Paul within the next couple of weeks your prioritization for the items that are listed there. There are 7 categories that are listed. So if you would please look at those things, a lot of good work there, just as we've already heard with the traffic stop committee. So please take a look at that information and provide to Paul your feedback so that he could then summarize and send the results out to us, the entire CPAC, in preparation for the February meeting.
I agree 100%. And I'm not questioning anything that was on that communications report, but it's obvious as we look across the board here this afternoon or this evening that we're not interpreting this 100% exactly. And when we put this thing into action, it's got to be right. It's got to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, that's the point that we were talking about is one of about 40 something things.
Exactly. Exactly.
So guys, if you guys go through there, this is not our executable plan. These are recommendations that came up. Some are good and some are bad. You know, well, none of them are bad. All of them have good intent, but they may not be in line with what we all want to do, which is why I'm asking for your feedback and then your prioritization. We will then come back with an action plan and say, okay, guys, thumbs up or thumbs down, but here's our plan of action. Then we move towards the execution of that. This will also be the opportunity for, now that the chief has seen a copy of this and everything else, they're allowed to give feedback as well because they're part of our council. And guys in uniform, I do expect your feedback too.
And please also, when you are looking at sending your feedback to Paul, please make sure that you refer back to the guidelines for CPAC to help ensure that that you help us prioritize accurately. Okay, Joe?
I agree a lot with what's being said, and I think Hack's on point, but I'm not too sure that establishing a critical incident alert protocol with CPD, to me, simply says we will be alerted by CPD with their information and their perception of what they're reporting on. We're not investigating anything. We're not going to distribute the information. But if we, at some point down this yellow brick road that we're going, get to a point that we have organizations that will call Paul or me or you and say, hey, what's going on? Do you know what's happening? We would then have the information that has been provided to us by the police department to say, okay, the latest information I have is there has been a robbery at boom, 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 boom. That's it. That's all we can tell them. We're not going to sit there and say, and there's 12 officers on site and we're loading ammunition. We're not going to go through all that. And that's the way I looked at it. It's simply a protocol where we receive information from CPD and then, we're not going to go publicize information. That's not our job. We're the voice of the citizens. So if a citizen, my neighbor comes to me and says, hey, I understand you're on CPAC. What's going on? All I can say is, I can tell you what the protocol is, and that is, they're investigating it. That's it. Now, personally, I think it's a good tool because it'll kind of brings everything down a little bit and it doesn't allow it to continually bubble over out the pot, because that's where you get all the innuendos and suspicions and nobody's doing nothing. And, my cousin was there and a friend of my cousin saw this and, and pretty soon you got May again. People burning stuff in the street, running in and out, busting windows. So, that was the way I looked at it. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And we clearly recognize, the communication subcommittee was clearly looking at that and recognizes the fact that we need to have a proper flow for communications to ensure that we get to working, we really start to working on the reason for which this council was organized, which is to work on harmonious relationships between the community and the police department. So I think if everyone would take some time within the next 2 weeks, review the items. And if you have any questions about any of them, please make sure you get those questions even to Paul, because the communication subcommittee will be having a meeting prior to the February CPAC meeting. Okay, thanks again, Paul, and everybody for your input. Let's go to the Policy and Procedures Subcommittee. I know, again, your agenda shows that Max would be giving the presentation, but as I explained at the beginning, Max had a fire incident happen. He is safe and unharmed, but unable to be with us tonight. And so Jerome Harris is a member of that subcommittee as well, and he willingly accepted to present on the subcommittee's behalf.
Sure. So the subcommittee's responsibility the priority was to review the changes that have been made in the complaint procedure. Captain Cretella actually provided us with a PowerPoint to review the overall review policy, how the department proceeds in terms of reviewing policy. And again, in this theme of communication, in the current procedure and process, there's not a role baked into it for CPAC to be involved in the existing process in the annual review process. So one of the recommendations is for the department to think about how it might integrate CPAC into that. That may simply be, providing information to the subcommittee or others. But again, for them to think about baking us into that. The department is certified by CALEA, a national accreditation of law enforcement agencies. It's a gold standard, if you will. We're one of the relatively few departments in the state of South Carolina that is accredited. There's a review process, and every so often review process, I think maybe 3 to 5 years, there's a review. Again, in that review, we raised the question whether or not inside the CALEA standards are there standards or metrics that speak to community policing relations or citizens review. Is that already baked into that, and what they might be, because the department would have to, in fact, respond to the oversight committee of CALEA and satisfy that they're in place, and raise the question, what is the role, if any, or should there be a role for CPAC? Again, this links back to communications as part of the CALEA reaccreditation process. Finally, we talked about there was a PowerPoint presentation describing the updated complaint procedure that has been in place and since March, and we talked about, they were presented what those changes had been, and we suggested that this is a good place for us to get a sense of, what's the feedback, what's happened as a result with difference and change, are there a few complaints, is the process working for the department, is it working for the community? It's too soon to know, so we laid that out. And then there was a discussion of the current activities and the procedures in the complaint area. But again, here is an example where it's really about how much information, how much communication, and how can CPAC be helpful to the department and being a bridge to the community around these procedural and process points. So that's the report. And the recommendations, the way we laid it out, the observations with what we thought we heard, and the recommendations are for discussion points for the department to consider as they continue to move forward.
Thank you, Jerry. So anyone has any questions for the Policy and Procedures Subcommittee? Jerry? Jerry, I've got one. So with the recommendation, consider modification of the process to provide for CPAC and our community review comment. Once that was shared, when the policy review process was shared, what was the feedback?
This is a question of conversation with the chief, the Captain Cretella, and you're on the phone, so you can say what you said. But what I heard you say was that the questions of that would be taken up with the chief, and perhaps we could talk about that in the future.
You're absolutely right. We have spoken to the chief about it and have gone back and forth, and we do have progress on that. And hopefully we'll have a final resolution in the next few weeks for CPAC, but it is leaning in the right direction of what we talked about and forming that partnership of everything that we want to do. And
to Joe's point earlier, this is again a situation of establishing a protocol, all right, about how this piece of communication would happen between the department and the CPAC and or the community, depending on what makes the most sense in terms of that.
Thank you. So then that also, Captain Cretella and Jerry, that also carries through then at the CALEA standards
Mm-hmm.
and the complaint policy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then we could look forward to maybe at the next CPAC meeting in February, hearing some more activity there to where maybe citizen involvement would be woven in and be able to be explained and expressed to the community?
I would hope so.
Okay. Good
And
deal.
a time
Joe?
and a time frame for making it happen. All right. Because these things, because you outline them and say we want to put it in place, the data collection, the information sharing, the feedback loops, all of this takes time and resources, and
Right.
don't want to be disruptive.
Right, but it would have it, so then you all would be also working, or Captain Cretella would then share an execution schedule for actually implementing.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would hope we could. What I would hope is that the captain would give us feedback in terms of what they're thinking about the policy review process of the CALEA. All right, and then we would come with a recommendation that is the result of our discussion, and we would come in with what the police department and the CPAC subcommittee are recommending for us, how we would move forward in that regard.
If I may, the CALEA incorporation, the partnership with us, that's an easy one to fulfill. We can do that sooner rather than later. And same with our complaint data. When Mr. Harris spoke of it, the chief and I have already had a plan in place. It should be done by the end of this year, actually. And it'll be updated quarterly starting next year. So that's moving relatively quickly. And the last one is a policy piece. And we were just trying to figure out the best way to involve CPAC in that. We have a few suggestions, but we'll probably meet with the subcommittee just to give our proposal and see if that is within their interpretation of what we want to propose, but that will also happen. But the other two will happen obviously a lot quicker because those are an easy lift, if you will.
Thank you. Joe, you had your hand up.
Yeah, that last recent work to improve complaint procedures, I know that it's just a suggestion that is on the table. I certainly think that CPAC should play a role, but as an advisor to establishing priorities for review and revisions of policies, because we have to, as you just said, and the chairman said it, we have to make sure that we maintain the mission statement of this council, and that is to be the voice of the people. So we shouldn't say we're playing a role in setting priorities. We're not going to set the priorities. We can't tell you to do that. We have no oversight, but we can be part of it and suggesting that, hey, Captain Tony, have you thought about this? Or, Dustin, can we do this over here? Or these kinds of things, because that's what we hear from the community. And I'm thinking outside, one second, Drew, I'm thinking outside the big picture. I'm saying 6 or 8 months from now, that when we have already executed a lot of the subcommittee reports and we're out in the community, that now these people are going to be addressing us to say, hey, listen, what about so-and-so, so-and-so? And we can say, sure, we will be glad to present that on your behalf, or we'll be glad to work with you on that. I just don't want us to have myself in a corner.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I could, when both Captain Cretella and Wendy and the chief talk about how many policies and procedures there are, okay? There's a long list. The standard is, the recommendation in the audit was that they all be reviewed annually. That's not happening, all right? So the notion of setting priorities was, which are most important, Chief, what do you think is important? All right, so helping kind of help prioritize in terms of order, what might be more important to do than others, but not the notion of saying, this is what you do. And so it's an interactive kind of thing to help us be able to eat the elephant one bite at a time.
And I appreciate the detail on that, because you're absolutely correct. And that's where I think CPAC plays a vital role with CPD, in that once we are in the communities, once we're talking to the people in the communities and they're talking back to us, then we can certainly sit down with those bodies at CBD who are going to be looking at this enormous list of applications that they have to look at and discuss, and say, well, they're not really worried about this. They're really concerned about this, and back and forth. I think that's what you were saying.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or sharing for Policy and Procedures Subcommittee? Jerry, thank you very much for providing that report. So lots of good work. Now you see why I was excited, right? Lots of good work from the subcommittees going on. I think we're really on the right track, Chief. What do you think? All right, all right. We now down at the update section, Captain Thompson has helped us out tremendously. He has contacted Mr. David Crosby, who's the data integrations and analysis manager for the police department. And he's actually on our call tonight to share with us the crime analysis unit update. Mr. Crosby, David?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate the opportunity and your engagement with us. So I think what I'll probably do, and I'm definitely open up to any questions that you have, is we'll probably just go over a quick overview of kind of like what our analysis unit does, how we pull things together, maybe some, examples of some of the products that we put out, what they're used for, and then maybe get into a couple of the audit findings and some of our complications there and what we're working to kind of like get past those issues that we're having. So with that being said, as they mentioned, I manage our crime analysis unit. Some of our analysts are specifically, data driven. We pretty much supplement all operations of the department. We basically just try to leverage our data to improve the quality of service to the citizens in our city. We kind of do that by gathering, cleaning, compiling, visualizing, and disseminating statistical and analytical products to our officers, our command staff, city entities, and ultimately our citizens as well. We do that in a number of ways. The easiest one to explain, and the one that I think most of you are probably most familiar with, is kind of our operational analysis. This tends to be your weekly crime statistics, where we see where our our burglary is, where our arrests are. It's the kind of things that we kind of use as our litmus test and our gauge to see where we might have trends and problems occurring. A perfect example of this, and I'm not sure what's been shared here before, so I apologize if I'm kind of rehashing some of this, but our Opstat report, which is actually published on our Charleston website, so you can actually get a copy of this report that goes to our command staff every week. This breaks down kind of our part 1 crimes, which is ag assaults, homicides, robberies, rape, burglary, breaking and entering, theft from motor vehicle, drug violations, weapon law violations. This report looks at all of those data types. We look at weekly, so what we had that last week, we have month to date, quarter to date, year to date, 5-year trend, so it kind of gives us that area of what we're working with. and it also gives us a projection. It's also in there for citywide, and then we break it down by teams, which is kind of like our precincts. And even within those teams, we have a graphical representation of our different beats, and then those beats will actually change in color based on where the most crime is. So it's a very quick overview for our command staff to kind of just see, you know, where we are, where we're going. Are we seeing spikes? Where are these problem areas? And what that does is that kind of gets us to our next piece, which is kind of our strategic analysis. When we do see these spikes, or we see things that start to become an outlier, or we see things that are a little bit abnormal, you know, then we'll start getting into trend analysis. So we'll look at, you know, time of day, hot spots, again, anything unusual, and we try to come up with strategies so that we can kind of put things in place and kind of direct our limited resources to kind of take care of the emerging trends that are becoming a problem. So that's kind of our strategic part of it. Another huge part is management and administrative. You know, obviously on a couple of levels, you know, you'll constantly hear data people say garbage in, garbage out. So we have a number of reports that we pull together that look to make sure that things are being done correctly and consistently, because it's kind of hard to do analysis on numbers and data if everyone or the large majority aren't doing things the exact same way. And so if we identify deficiencies there, you know, if it's a small number, we can do one-on-one training. If it's a larger number, then we can put it in yearly training, you know, to shore that up. So that's some of the management. We also do officer stats. These kind of things allow us to see if certain officers are kind of like standing out, and then we can kind of look at that, you know, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it the right reason, the wrong reason? So it's just checks and balances in there for everybody in the entire department. This also allows us to do some data integrity, you know, just to make sure, again, that we're capturing what we need, how we need to. And so that that's a very broad, quick overview of just the basics of the unit. I heard that there was also some questions, just kind of like, you know, the major systems that we get our information from and how we get that information. I would say that our 4 biggest systems are the ones that you're probably going to get 90% of your data from. Obviously, RMS, our records management system, that's where all of our arrest and incident data goes into. You also have a CAD system, which is at Consolidated Dispatch. It's not owned or operated by us, but we do have direct feeds to that information. So that would be all your 911 calls. The next piece of this is we use a state system for our electronic citations. So that's going to be your accidents, your tickets, and your warnings. That's owned, operated, and maintained by the state. We do not have a direct connection to that data set. We get that data through an XML dump into an FTP server that we then have to pull the files down and ingest into a local database. So that one's a little bit complicated. And then the last one of those is kind of a big one is our camera server. That's actually hosted in the cloud. It's on Azure. We do have a direct connection to that data set. But we don't actually directly maintain it or admin it. So we have to get, you know, access to the pieces that we need. So what we're having to do today to get a number of these reports that you're seeing and answer a lot of these questions that are coming up is call on 4 different systems and 4 geographical locations, admin by 4 different groups into a common format, clean it up so that it's the same data type, and making sure that it's consistent and accurate, so that we can put out a product that answers your questions. Specifically, going into the audit, if you kind of look under the findings 6 and 7, where it specifically talks about traffic stops, which I know has been a big subject matter, that is definitely a question we want to answer 100% the way that it's been listed in the audit. Some of the biggest and the easiest way for me to explain it is anytime you want 2 systems to talk, or you're wanting to do analysis across 2 or 3 systems, there needs to be a common identifier so that I can know that when this call came into CAD or to the 911 center, it ultimately resulted in this report or this FCC that's in our RMS system. And I also want to know if that resulted in a citation. I need to have some sort of way to link each one of those data sets together. There are clean ways to do that. There are ways that you can get some of it, but it's not going to be overly accurate or consistent. And then there's best practices in the ways that you do it. So you're getting, a true, consistent, bulk of that data. You want it to be as accurate as possible. Some of our limitations there is we don't have a common identifier across those 3 sets. But I will say that we've been in active discussion and we've actually made a lot of progress to where we're trying to get the state to add a form field in their system. We're going to add one into our RMS system, and then that identifier already exists in our CAD system. So once we get those 3 in place, we will then be able to start tracking and answering that question of, where that full call of the dispatch call, whether it be self-initiated or if it was a call for service to the 911 center. Did that result in an incident? If it did, did they receive a citation? We'll also get the demographics. And so we'll have all this information finally in a common format that, we can kind of pull in and do that analysis. But as the audit stated, even when we get to that point that we can finally connect those dots, you're still going to be almost a year before you're able to actually do any meaningful analysis, because then you have to get the data. And this isn't something we can apply historically in any way. So it's going to be from the day we can finally turn this on, make this happen, it's going to be going forward. So it's going to take about a year probably to get you enough data to do what I would consider a meaningful analysis. So I don't want to take up too much time because I know you guys have a lot to talk about. So I'll kind of leave it open to questions that any of y'all have, because I'm sure that you have some.
David, when you said it's going to take a year from now or a year from when you're finally able to get a common identifier?
So it's the year is just I don't want to say arbitrary, but it's kind of a metric that once you have those pieces in place, and I hope those pieces are in place significantly faster than a year. We're kind of going through, there's a cost association to adding those fields. I've already got what it would cost and the stuff in place for the state, and I'm working on our RMS vendor. And then it's just a matter of what's the cost, funding it, and then implementation. So we're just kind of working through that. I'm hoping that is a, less than 2 to 3 month process, and then from there, once it's in place, to get meaningful analysis would be a year from that point, if that makes sense. Because you're getting enough data to do the analysis. So I could after a week, I could give you analysis of a week, but that sample size just isn't going to be a proper representation of what we do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It's just the concern is that the thought or the perception of discriminatory practices, and data is the only thing that can be used to help with proving one way or the other. And we're saying that you wouldn't be able to have data in a presentable format without manipulation before probably a year's time, right?
Right.
I mean, I know you can get it. It's just that it would be harder to get it because you'd have to actually track those 4 different systems that you're saying that right now don't communicate with each other.
Correct.
David, can I jump in there real quick?
Yep.
Hey, everybody. Just real quick, one of the things David's talking about is for a year, that's to be able to identify any trends or patterns or anything like that that might be in the data. What the critical part is that we were missing, that we saw in the audit, and that identifying that common field across the platforms, we can immediately, once we get that there, then we can start immediately doing some quality control. And that's really where we kind of missing some gaps there. If you look back at the audit and they're saying, well, the data is not there, it can't be used in this way. Once we get that field in place, which like David said, hopefully in a couple of months at the most, we're already working on some things that'll be sooner than that, hopefully. Then it'll give us the ability to start doing that quality control, which gives us that high quality data to then start looking at trends along the way. So it sounds like a year is a big deal. Well, that is if we're looking at the patterns and trends and all that kind of stuff, but the quality control is really where the key part is and allow us to address some things in a much quicker manner and producing a better product overall. Does that kind of help clarify it a little bit?
Yeah, I was really thinking the same thing. It's just that, excuse me, the concern is that we've had all of this time where the citizens have been complaining, now not lodging their complaint with the police department through the proper channels, but saying out in the community their concern of what they see. But we're saying we won't be able to have some data to actually show whether what we think we see is fact or if what we think we see is just a certain isolated condition that appears to happen more so in this neighborhood versus another.
So, Juana, if you want me to respond briefly?
Yes, sir.
I've been intentionally reserving because I want to listen more and talk less. I think that's our role mainly, is to listen. But I will insert, no matter how good our data analytics, and there's not an agency, I would argue, probably in this country who has mastered this. Everybody wants to, but I challenge you to find an agency who has mastered this data analytics and this conversation around bias, around race, around all these data sets. I've not met anybody yet, and I'm sure maybe there's somebody in the country who has interconnected every one of these data sets and is doing what we're trying to do. But even when we do accomplish it, and we've said from day one with this audit, we have to embrace the conversation. We have to embrace this data conversation is only one of many related to this topic. Even when we do, we said from the beginning, this is the hardest part of it, and that it would probably take 5 years to accomplish. So we know that there are disparate numbers, correct? For just as an example, there's some really basic numbers that the audit identified. That doesn't mean a lot when it's not in context, right? When it's not connected to, like you said, a neighborhood. If, for example, the majority of our homicides are occurring in certain neighborhoods and they exist with a certain race, and violence is our highest priority, which it is right now. Our shootings are through the roof. Our homicides are double what they were the same time last year. We have a lot of significant challenges that we have. And if you look at that by race, there's overrepresentation in the African-American community, where these shootings are occurring, who's being shot, and who's doing the shooting. But we can't make a conclusion based on that. We want to get traffic stop data. We want to get field contact data. All these things are disparate. None of them are connected. As Dave kind of articulated, you have the state data that we can't even access, that we can't put in our data sets yet. We're overcoming that. But what we do, and I was just writing this down as you were talking, is we can review the policies. We can review our body camera program and audit it regularly. We can make sure that we're receiving complaints, which is extremely important, which we know we weren't receiving complaints. And we know that our complaint process is more transparent, but it can be even better. And the numbers of complaints that we're receiving has increased significantly, exponentially. We know that the complaint review process can be improved. We know that as we build relationships and we engage in those communities that trust us the least, and as we increase those relationships, we're going to have improvements in all of these areas in these dialogues. So I would just caution, I'll never forget when we implemented a body camera program back in a number of years ago in another jurisdiction. The council member said, wow, it's a shame that we have to have body cameras and technology to have trust with our communities. And we all had a big conversation around that and said, if that's the only reason and the only way we can have trust is because we now have a body camera program, then we have much bigger problems, right? Because it's really one contact at a time, one call at a time. As we build these relationships, as we build this dialogue, what's coming out is there's a lot of complexity around this. And it's the role of this council to continue to challenge us, to be prickly, to have these conversations. I promise you, this is exactly where I believe we need to be, and where we'll make the greatest progress. But I just caution over-reliance on a technology, on a data set. It's the entire thing that I think is going to get us to a better place. And we need to be in a better place on so many different levels. So I don't want to interrupt the data conversation. I think it's important that there continues to be a very bright light shine on our data. And this audit only began that process. And the audit CNA said from the beginning, your contract does not give you much when it comes to data. We didn't pay a lot for this contract that would have really yielded what we would have wanted. We all wanted a lot more with regards to data. But as David said, there's a lot of work we have to do to get a much clearer picture about what we're doing in all of these areas to add context to the conversation.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you too, David. Really appreciate your time.
No
Anyone
problem.
else? Joe?
David,
Yeah.
two questions. First off, the problem that seems to be there is that, are we talking about code, software code? Because we couldn't be talking about hardware. So obviously we don't have a uniform code within.
No,
the
sir.
system to
So
allow
what
it.
the problem is you have to have something that you can link data sets together so that I know that this citation is 100% tied to this 911 call and is 100% tied to this incident. The problem is you can have a 911 call that never has an incident. You know, someone calls, but it didn't reach the level of being an incident. You know, you might have had a traffic stop that an officer didn't write a citation for that didn't have an incident. You know, those are all problems right there. But you can start linking these things where if you have that common identifier, we can have at that point, the same number is occurring in CAD, it occurs on the citation, and it occurs in the FCC. And so now we can say that all three of those items are tied to the exact same incident. So I know what the outcome was of that interaction.
And we would get a truer picture. I mean, I say we, CPD as well as the council, we get a truer picture of the value of what's going on instead of imagine, if you will, numbers.
100%. So it allows you to just kind of see an entire interaction from start to finish. How was it initiated? Was it initiated by the officer? Was it initiated by someone that called in a complaint? And what was the ultimate outcome, as well with your demographic information across all of that? So you would know the officer, you would know, you know, the citizen, you would know everything about that call. And so it just gives you that broader picture to kind of just, you know, give you a better data set.
Is this something that would have to occur collectively or could it be individualized? I mean, the state will not let us have certain information.
So
beyond me why, but I mean,
yeah, it's not so much that they control it. So we're trying to make three systems that are independent of each other do something for just Charleston, if that makes sense. So the state operates that citation system for the entire state. You know, some departments could probably care less if they do this, you know, but we want to do this. So we're having to put these pieces together. You know, dispatch, that's run by a consolidated dispatch center. It's not run by the city of Charleston. So they're worried about making the best 911 system they can, but not necessarily that I'm able to tie their 911 call to my RMS. So it's on us as an agency to bridge that gap and get those pieces together. And the way we do that is asking our partners to allow us to add the piece that we need to make it work. And that's kind of what we're going through right now, is to get those entities to do something that will only be utilized by us because we need it and we want it, and just bridging that gap so that we can get to the point we need to be.
that's why I was asking if it was code, because I would figure that as a separate entity, the Charleston Police Department could maybe have their own code or subscription code to get that information, because you did mention some type of cost.
Right, and the cost, it's a one-time cost, and it's not a tremendous cost, but what all that is you're paying the software company that the state uses for their citation system to add a field into that data set that we can use to link it to CAD. And then the same thing in RMS. We're going to have our RMS vendor go in and add what we call a UDF. It's a user defined field. So they don't care what goes in that field. We just tell them this is where it's going to go. It's a number field and it's this many characters. So that's all they see. That's what we're paying for, that one-time cost to just have them added to the system. And then that allows our officer to continue that call number across all of those data sets so that we can link them together.
You make it sound relatively simple when you say it that way. So
Yeah,
we could probably have it. We could probably have it, what, by Monday morning?
yeah, sure.
Thank you, David.
Yep.
Any other questions for David? David, thank you very much for your time this evening for our
Yes, ma'am.
meeting. Really appreciate it. We look forward to hearing from you at a future meeting, especially since, in 2 months we'll be meeting, and probably in 2 months you'll have this wonderful
Hey.
drop down from on high.
I hope so. We'll see.
Thank you. Captain Thompson will give us now information on community engagement.
Sure,
And thank you again, Captain Thompson, for making sure that David Crosby joined us tonight. Really appreciate that.
I was going to say, you guys realize why I had him here. I could never have said it better than he can, or even try. But yeah, thank you, David. Thank you for everybody for coming tonight. I'll be really watching the time along with Twan. So we want to give the chief some time at the end to talk about the after action and field any questions with that. Before I run down some of the things we're doing, it's important to just remind everybody that this is just not the community action team, the community team. This is something that the whole department is getting involved in. And I have a couple examples of some other areas of the department where they're getting involved like we want them to. The audit showed that it was only the community action teams doing outreach, and it needs to be a top down. Everybody in the department needs to understand that balanced approach with balancing the community, building community partnerships along with the traditional police work. So I'll run through a couple of them that happened in the month of November that we're really excited about. Obviously, we continue with the food drives. Those have been very fruitful over the last month. We always invite the whole department to come, and we always have a good turnout with those. The Cops, Cougars, and Kids is a basketball clinic that we partner with North Charleston to do. And we had the College of Charleston there. The chief was there. Deputy Chief Walker that was on the line came out. Anytime we're trying to have that positive interaction with the youth or their adults or their family members, it's always centered around food, sports, something to get to break that ice. So we're really excited. I've challenged the team to come up with new ideas. I mentioned on the last call that we purchased a basketball goal, and we have a pickup truck now that was given to us by our traffic division. And that's a pop-up event that we have, and we're really excited about doing some more informal, as y'all have heard me say several times, more informal encounters with the youth just to build those relationships in the community. We did, which has been very successful. One of the chief's ideas was our command posts that I've spoken about. We did 2 of those in November. Actually got out to some other communities that we haven't been in a while, out on Daniel Island, and then down in East Bay and Market. We were able to take our command post out there and leave it out there and do our roll calls where the officers come in and check in, and then stay out there to, it's a very big machine that draws a lot of attention, and we get a lot of positive interactions from that, letting people tour it. And it's just a really good idea that was brought up, and we're continuing with that effort. One thing that has garnered lately is our participation with the Latino Advisory Council through the mayor's office. 2 contacts that we made out of that council have reached out to us over the last couple of months, and we were able to do our first and second now walks out on Johns Island with the Hispanic community. It kind of ties into the partnership project that we're doing with the Coastal Crisis Chaplaincy that I've referenced earlier. Is getting out in the community, being boots on the ground, no agenda, just being there with the community, walking, interacting, and those were very successful out on Johns Island. The Latino community out there really needs us. It's way out on Johns Island, and these were 2 very welcomed walks with the community out there. It's very well attended. We posted some of our pictures on social media if you want to take a look at those. The last thing, well, not the last thing, but one of the really good ideas that came out of community outreach in the last couple of months is our Good Night Lights that we've been advertising on social media. Actually, we've already had one event, and the second event is tonight, is where we go over and we activate our blue lights at a certain time over at the hospital, Children's Hospital. And we've already issued out bags to those children in the hospital, and they actually flash a light back at us. And I just want to read one thing. I got a quote from Lieutenant Murray from a family member, and it just kind of sums up, some of the good things that the department is doing. And this is the quote. It says, and this is in reference to Good Night Lights. It says, "My daughter flashed her light back to you and was so touched as I was. She kept saying, 'It's like the 4th of July, red, white, and blue.' Then she asked, 'Do they know me?' I'm sure each child thought it was special and such a sign of peace and hope. Thank you all." So really touching, that one child's life, and I know many more, but another great idea that came out of the department and was facilitated by our team and well represented by other members of the department. So we're very happy about the Good Night Lights. The last example I'll give you is a good example of other areas of the department thinking about community outreach and thinking about building those partnerships is our school resource officers. They work for Captain Bruder, who was talking earlier, helping out Dave Crosby with some of that explanation. But they've within the schools, they call them discussion circles, where the officers get with a small group of high school students, and they have different topics each month, and they just have that positive interaction, and they learn about policing along with life skills and playing that mentor role. So that whole team has embraced that, the discussion circles that they're having. And I've been provided a couple of examples from their team just to document those and keep up with them. So those are some really good things that we're excited about in current now and in the future. So please continue to let me know. The basketball goal in the back of a pickup truck came from a community meeting. So any ideas that you guys have, especially during COVID, we really appreciate it. Last thing I'll mention is Jerry and some other ones have continued to remind me about the Policing 101. I did meet with Laquilla, who's the community outreach coordinator, after our last meeting to just kind of go over what I was envisioning as she plans for the first Citizens Academy of the year. I have not for next year. I've not seen her finalized project, but she reached out to Orlando PD to get that. They have a complete online virtual Citizens Academy. So out of that preparation, I've asked for her, and you guys can think about it. We can talk about it at the next meeting or beforehand, that this group meet, either during the week or on a weekend day, 2 days, 4 hours apiece. I don't want to rush it. The Policing 101, I was had the opportunity to help out developing that program back when it started, and it was 5 hours on one Saturday, and it felt kind of rushed with some of the feedback that we got. So if we split it up, 4 hours, 2 days, or 3 hours, 2 days, we hope to get that in the first or second quarter of next year. So I haven't forgot about that. We'll get everybody through that safely if we can, but we're still planning for that.
Thank you very much, Captain Thompson. You saw I'm writing a bunch of notes. Thank you. That sounds good. I'll make sure that we have that on the agenda for the next meeting. Thank you. Now, Chief, I know we have you down for the after action report updates from the event, the incident that happened on May 30th and 31st. But just before you start, I know that we received an email. Captain Thompson notified that the period for providing comments has been extended to the end of the year. So I do recognize council members, I wanted you to know that because tonight it was already on our agenda, but because of COVID and the other situations going on, the time has been extended to be able to provide comments. Chief, if you would just share with us your preliminary comments that you have, because I know that it's not conclusive as of yet because of the fact that you've extended the period. We do appreciate you still agreeing, though, to discuss the item with us.
Of course, and if I could, before I cover that, I just wanted to thank everybody from the subcommittees and all the different reports that we got, and just comment briefly on those things. I didn't want to interrupt. In fact, I'm sorry I even interrupted the data part, but I just wanted to kind of at least address and answer some of your questions in a contemporary way when you asked them. I want to say overall, I'm very encouraged by what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, and not just from you and this group and reporting out in the subcommittees, but also from my folks that have been part of, I think Arthur Lee and some other people mentioned earlier that were part of the traffic subcommittee. And I'm just going to say generally for all of our work, and because I know there was a lot of comments, and I don't want to reopen that. We don't have time to do that. But I want to just say everything can be improved on. And no matter what we do, it's my intent, I say this inside the organization a lot, that we eventually become what I describe as a level 5 organization. Very few organizations ever achieve that. It's certainly my vision, my goal. And in order to get there, we have a lot of work to do. So I think it's just an assumption that we can do more. And I'll touch a little bit on the complaint or on the complaint process that was mentioned and communications. And I'll just touch on communications. It's probably for us our number one complaint, that we don't complain enough, we don't communicate enough, that it's not timely, it's not specific enough, we're not getting information out enough. As you all know, those of you who are original members on this committee, it's something that's been brought up since this committee began. So I think I like best how Jerome described what the goal is. But to me, it's like a marriage. 1 + 1 is greater than 2. The more that we communicate, the better. And so there's a lot of lack of trust already in a lot of our communities. If we have something like an officer-involved shooting, an in-custody death, a hate crime, even just regular discussions about meetings that we have, it is going to be paramount for us now more than ever to have some level of communication about some of those events. So if we say currently we're not doing enough and we have a long ways to go, whatever we do to improve that is going to be a good thing. So I'll just say I've heard a lot about how sticky it is. I think it was one of the terms that was used. That's why it's so important to get it 100% right. Well, I'll tell you, in the absence of doing anything, we're going to rely on media, social media, and some of the most inaccurate, rumor-laden ways of communicating. So if we do nothing, I think that would be the worst outcome. So I'm so thankful for this group rolling their sleeves up and just kind of engaging in this. As has been discussed, there's 40 items. And one of the ones that was brought up was the critical incident review. I can tell you, again, if you're in a community and there's a shooting and we're coming to that community, whether we're directly involved or not, it's something that people want to hear about. We can't do everything overnight with any of these items, but what we can do is incrementally make things better. I'm excited about doing that, and I'm thankful that you're engaging in that work with us. So it's not going to be perfect, and I would just caution not doing anything in fear of not achieving perfection. And so I just throw that out. I like the idea of a podcast. I like the idea of all the suggestions that came up. There's not one thing that I've heard tonight that I disagree with. We can't do all of them. That's why we got to prioritize. That's what Paul talked about. And I think if we do 2 or 3 things and we do them really well, we're going to be in a much, much better place. So I'll just throw that out. I'm very encouraged by that. Same thing with the policy committee, the review of our processes, making sure that we are transparent as we make these improvements, as we talk about being accountable, creating a culture of accountability. That's what this is all about. It's putting some meat on that, not just talking about it, but actually doing it. A lot of good internal discussions that have come out of this, as Tony talked about, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. I want to compliment Dave Crosby, Captain Middleton, Jason Bruder, who's on this call and spoke up briefly earlier, was a big part of automating our department. I'll just to put context on what we're doing. 10 to 12 years ago, I wasn't here, but I can tell you, I've heard from our team, there was not one single computer in the entire police department. maybe as recent as 12 years ago. And so when Chief Greg Mullen and people like Jason Bruder and Dave Crosby actually worked in the city IT at that time, and others, thankfully, before I ever got here, they embraced the idea of automation. They created data sets. We have more today than they had then. They had zero. And so I just put that frame around it because I was surprised to learn that. But we've come a long, long ways in the last 10 to 12 years. And we have a long ways to go, but that's just a context. So with that, last thing I'll mention, and I'll get into the after action review, Naomi Broughton, who has 38 years of service to this city, was a police officer in North Charleston. And she's been a police officer in the city of Charleston for 35 years, broke a lot of barriers to become the deputy chief. Number two, has run the police department in the absence of the chief, has run the horse and mounted patrol unit, has been in every unit in this organization, and served in many, many capacities outside of our organization, not the least of which is being a Coast Guard lifetime career person. I think she received the Enlisted Officer of the Year for the entire country, for the entire Coast Guard, I think if I'm not mistaken, maybe in 2006. We are blessed that she is going to continue in law enforcement. She's going to join Chip Searson and be his deputy at the College of Charleston. But this is her last week with the city police department. So please reach out to her, thank her, congratulate her, and all of her many accomplishments and her contributions. And that process will begin soon. And I'm going to take my time, and we'll talk more about that selection process and more to come on what that might look like. And so with that, I'll start my review of the after action unless there's any questions about those things. Okay. So we have a preliminary after action report. It is not finalized. It won't be finalized until the input is received and there's additional review with the city council, public safety committee, and the overall main city council. It's an ongoing process. Following the protests and the riots that occurred May 30th and the 31st, CPD initiated an after action plan to review our response to the events and look at positive practices in place and determine lessons learned. The review is based on a nationally recognized model authored by the National Police Foundation. The model highlights the importance of such a review for law enforcement agencies to get a better understanding of their response and therefore create more effective training and policies while increasing transparency with the community. The preliminary report is 62 pages in length and is essentially divided into two sections: the information gathering section and the review of 5 key areas. The executive summary in the beginning of the report summarizes all the findings, and everybody should have access to that. There's a link, and hopefully you've all at least seen it and been able to review. I'm just highlighting some of the areas of the report tonight. The information section includes timelines of the May 30 and 31st events, the number of officers responding, the number of arrests made, calls for service, a damage assessment, and information regarding a response to resistance and aggression. There are also several maps of the routes of the protesters and the rioters, which are attached in the appendices. The 5 areas reviewed included command and control, internal communications, external communications, tracking resources and personnel, and responding to civil disturbance. Each area contains a description of positive practices, areas for improvement, and lessons learned. In reviewing these key areas, I'm going to highlight those 5 areas and just highlight some of the things that were in the report itself. Command and control, a positive practice was we developed an appropriate plan based on confirmed intelligence and had sufficient resources available for what we knew and what we had in the beginning. Lessons learned: as the situation changed, we were lacking a contingency plan for the extreme circumstances, and there was duplication of efforts. Part of the planning includes organizing our responses to significant events consistent with incident command system and the activating the planning section. Additional commanders have now been trained in the planning section and some other areas related to this. Internal communications, one of the positive things that occurred was we had designated Instant Channel 3, which is a channel for the event, and Plain Talk was utilized to reduce confusion. Lessons learned included other channels being utilized, and communication was limited between patrol and our operations center, and we had not identified clear staging areas. We have brought all the resources to one channel and worked with Consolidated Dispatch to accomplish this, identifying a staging manager and staging locations, and that's now part of our practices and has been over the last several months. External communications, a positive thing that occurred is we use reverse 911 to communicate with citizens on the peninsula to shelter in place. We also notified CARTA, Transportation Authority, to avoid downtown areas, and also utilize CPD's social media. Lessons learned is that we can do more, as we talked about earlier, with communication, as most information came from social media and the other local media, and we need to create a media team to partner with media outlets to give updates to the public. We have done that. We've created a media team to partner with media outlets to give updates and created a public information team. The fourth area is tracking resources and personnel. One of the positive practices was we have invested heavily in our relationships with our neighboring partners. We got tremendous support from all of our partners without exception. Lessons learned was tracking officers could have been more efficient. And our planning is to have and what we've done is having a single point of contact, having a properly staffed staging area location, having someone in charge of documenting and listing all the officers who respond to help. And now we have this staging manager and have that accountability of those areas. The final area is response to civil disturbance. One of the positive practices was we trained the entire department on civil disturbance unit tactics in 2019. Officers were prepared to assist members of the mobile field force, and we regularly trained with partnering agencies and small security teams assigned to the fire stations and the trucks, the fire trucks, and that was something that helped in our response. Lessons learned was that resources started to become overwhelmed quickly, and the plan is that we have improved our process for immediate recall of additional department resources. Another subset of the civil disturbance response is the arrest process. Many people were arrested, processed, and transported in a timely manner. That was the positive practice. The lessons learned, we need more efficient processes for large numbers of arrests. And we put an arrest processing team of detectives in place and have done this since that time more efficiently, more effectively. The third piece underneath the civil disturbance response is the use of chemical agents. CPD had an efficient and effective process for deploying chemical agents. One of the lessons learned is needing more specific detail on each deployment, and a plan that was enacted is developing a more efficient, reliable way to track the use of any chemical agents to determine what types of munition are used and are most effective. Finally, there is a moving forward section that outlines improvements made and actions in progress. And I'm going to read actions taken to date first. And that is, we have a lead field commander to coordinate resources in the field, a single point of contact for our operations center. We have a new software program for all pre-planned events for improved communication, structure, and accounting for personnel and equipment. We have a new text messaging notification group for supervisors to improve communication. We have regular email updates regarding status of events to department employees. We have new forms and a process for multiple arrests. We have case agent assigned as a point of contact when multiple arresting officers exist. We have a new business and services division email list for notification of those folks and about upcoming events and updated information. We have new public information team to assist with dissemination of information and additional protective equipment for officers. Actions that are in progress, still in progress. review of the CPD policies regarding response to civil disturbance, additional scenario-based training to include current trends, review of best practices to increase consistent communication with employees during critical incidents, researching new technology, improved equipment and use of vehicles, researching use of resources for crowd control. For example, one of the things that is used very effectively in other jurisdictions are bicycle officers, which we have, but they're not a part of our civil disturbance unit. Continual peer support and resources for officers and professional staff. I'm not going to get in great detail because we don't have time, but this has been a very difficult year. You've heard me talk about our employees, and the suicide ideation rate for public safety has been very high, and it's increased significantly in this past year. Some of the conclusions: this was a significant event, and we need to learn and grow stronger, and we need to improve and take ownership of each and every one of these areas. Moving forward, we did not want to wait for the after action report to be completed before making changes. Since that time of May 30th and the 31st, there have been many protests throughout the city and a substantial use of CPD resources. We have continued to make changes and improvements and adapt so that we are better in place today. The preliminary report was presented to the Public Safety Committee on October 8th. The committee members requested additional information in the form of business property damage and citizen observations and feedback regarding the protests and riots, and we are in the process of gathering that information to put it in a final report. As was already mentioned, Dustin Thompson has briefly sent an email requesting that information input, and that deadline for feedback has been extended to December 31st. We have received both positive and critical feedback regarding our response to the protests and riots on May 30th and May 31st. We have received some complaints that we are investigating and reviewing, and we are seeking input from the community and would like to hear personal stories and encourage anyone to contact Captain Thompson with any additional stories or feedback they may have.
Thank you so much, Chief. Any questions, council members? And Chief, we really appreciate, I know you were trying to be quiet and not enter into or engage in the discussions, but we always appreciate the information that you share with us. And we truly appreciate your staff being present. They've been continuing with us throughout these meetings, and we are really, really appreciative for that. Jerry, got your hand up?
Yeah, Chief Reynolds. The process is, we've notified the public that they can provide comments and the like. Is there any process on the way of conceive of whether it's any of your street teams or community outreach people who are aggressively encouraging people to make comments, stories, positive or negative?
Yeah, I'm going to let Dustin, I'm going to put you on the spot. I like to do that. I'm going to let Dustin kind of talk a little bit about not only what we've done up to this point, but I will share with you one of the criticisms and requests that we received just recently was that some people have not had a chance or maybe didn't know. So the reason why we extended it 30 days and we're putting it on our website, and I'll let Dustin talk more specifically about that because he's helping lead that effort, is that we don't want anybody left out. We're not rushing this. We're not hiding anything. And there was some people that felt that way. So thank you for raising that concern.
Yes, sir. I sent it to our PIO team today to put out on our social media platforms, just are extending it for 30 days. Back in October, we did make the announcement on the Public Safety Committee that we were opening this up to public comment. And to back up, I had been meeting with several business owners and citizens along the way, informally, no formal announcement that we were doing that. But, we went right after May 30th and 31st, our team went out and walked King Street. They walked King Street and some of the outlying areas several times. So we did have our community engagement, just not putting out in the form that we're doing it now. Back in
Not
October,
just, not just the business community, but the residential. community. I
Yes,
think
sir.
it's important, very important to note that.
So the first round in the late October, I sent it out obviously to all the Citizens Advisory Council, to citizens, to our city council members, all of our central business district contacts, our market areas, our neighborhood association presidents in the surrounding area. So we got it out to over 400 or 500 contacts. Like the chief said, here in the last couple of weeks, we've got some interest that, to extend this out and to re-advertise it again. So that's what we're doing. We're not in a rush. I have received, several positive and negative, not negative, but, emails for that they're encouraging us to do better, which we need to listen, and we do need to get better in all aspects that we're doing. So we're extending it out 30 more days. And hopefully we'll have some more feedback that we can digest before we put out our final after action review.
Let me ask, at our next meeting in February, and I'm looking at the clocks, I appreciate you all still staying with us. We're over just a little bit. So at the next meeting, Chief, would you want to share with us then at the February meeting?
Yeah, I think what we can do then is we may have a final approved version of the report, which will incorporate these things. And I think at that point, it would be appropriate for Dustin to highlight what he's heard and just incorporate that and add that to this conversation.
Okay, sounds
and
good.
I think Terry had another question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask whether the mayor's faith network was included in your distribution for invitations to.
I'll check with the mayor. He was on the emails that I did send out, and it was picked up by all the local media, but I'll double check with the mayor to make sure that was forwarded to him.
I do know my pastor received it. I know my church received
Yes,
it.
and if not, Michael Wax certainly has access to that list, and we can get it.
I'm just saying it's a good double back,
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir. But that's what we want to hear. We want to make sure that everybody knows who to contact. That's why we had a single point of contact. And we don't want to shy away from any feedback. We need that, obviously.
Yeah. Any other questions or additions? Looking at topics for our next agenda. Oh, sir.
Just
Paul?
one comment, just a side note. I think as a citizens group, I want to acknowledge, I think today, Sergeant Steve Hood, who's been with the department for 44 years, also retired. I think that's an accomplishment, but I also think more importantly, I'm a human resources guy. While you hate to lose that type of experience and institutional knowledge, I also see this, and I'm an old guy, so I can say this as an old guy. It's an amazing opportunity to allow new, fresh ideas to come in. And even more importantly, that just cleared a slot for some of these younger folks to be able to move in and these more motivated folks to move up to these positions. And you want to improve your police department on the people side of it. They need to be motivated. And motivation is not always money, it's opportunity. Okay, so I look at this as, well, I hate that we'll lose the guy because he's, 44 years, a lot of time. I think it's a great opportunity, just like in the other case, Chief, that you mentioned. These are wonderful ways of motivating your people to reward them for a job well done and to acknowledge leadership of those people with the traits that we need for today's policing, not for the policing of 30 years ago.
Amen. And thank you for mentioning Steve. I just went to lunch with him today. Went to lunch with Naomi earlier this week. And I couldn't say it any better than Paul just did. We're very fortunate to have some amazing people on all ends of the spectrum in this city. And we're only as good as the talent that we have. And we have a very talented core of people. And you've said that. I don't need to say that. You've seen it. You've witnessed it. You're going to continue to engage with our folks even more. I'm thankful for that. Well said. Thanks.
Thank you. And Paul, I think, did you ever let the council know when Chief said just now that you're working with the Police Foundation, right?
Well, sure. Well, it wasn't, we haven't done enough for me to really go. I think, his team got to hear my mantra that the subcommittee heard was, I don't go to meetings for the sake of having meetings. I go to move with executables. So what I did is I did meet with the chief and his team. They're in the preliminary discussions of putting together and doing the legal paperwork and everything else, of putting together a police support fund outside of the union and everything else, and outside of, what I would say is the tentacles of the chief, because he's really not allowed to be involved in raising funds for the support of his troops. And the reality is, we need these officers, and here's my commercial. These officers need to be as respected and motivated as our citizens are. And so if they're out there in, let's just say during the riots, who provides them water? If the chief doesn't have a budget to provide them water, where's their morale going? And what does a bad morale turn out to in the middle of a street? And so different things like that, being able to say, we want to have a functional ability to provide certain things for, our police officers that will not be coming through the budget. And this is not, and I was very clear with the chief, and he'll nod his head in a minute, because I said, I want to make very clear that anything that we do with this fund is not taking something from the budget. I don't want the city council saying, well, if the fund's going to provide it, we don't need to provide it. That's not going to be the way it works. We don't want to be a pass along. We want to be able to do stuff that the council and his budget are not allowed to do. Putting on, something as simple as a holiday party for some of these, for their families. We all know how important that is with our companies. In the military, I was in the National Guard, and we only did 1 week in a month in our little deployments or whatever. But that one event for the family was so important once a year, so because they couldn't be involved in what we did. Just like the family can't ride along with the department. So if we can sponsor things like that, and it's not, I'm not saying we as the advisory committee, but in creating this separate fund to be able to do that, it's a way of having that joint interaction that's outside of the budget to show, we support these organizational events, and all these groups and committees. We also need to have a way of showing the police department we appreciate them too.
And
Thanks, Paul, for sharing.
Not to take it in a whole different direction, because we could talk on a separate occasion about that, but it could also be, as we talked about, data analytics today, and it has been used for similar things in the past. When there was no funds for body cameras, Chief Mullen and their team received some private funding to get a program started. It could be, as somebody mentioned earlier, if there was a simple programming need to get some of our data going more quickly and more efficiently and more effectively, it could be used for that. There's a lot of community engagement things. Dustin could really make some great pitches with his team. I'll just give you an example. I have an ice cream truck that right now, with the really, really tight budgets, it's a time when we need to be out in the communities even more, but we may not have money for ice cream, but there's private donors that will step up in a minute and fund an initiative like that and partner with the police department to go in at-risk communities and do more with our youth and other things. So it's not, there's a variety of things. And I see Jerry with his hand up, and I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Let me ask before I call on Jerry, can we reach consensus to extend meeting for another 5 minutes to be able to wrap up? I'm trying to make sure that I do the facilitative leader thing and keep us on time. I do know that we say 5:30 to 7:30. We did start a little bit late today. So I do appreciate your patience with that. So looking at you for consensus, 5 minutes, and that would include me also stating what the next agenda items would be. I see a thumbs up from George. Thumbs up. Okay, 5 minutes, and I'm watching the clock. Jerry, I'll give you 2 minutes of it, and then
I'll just take one. Paul, I urge that we be careful in terms of crafting the messaging around the intent of this fundraising. As the chief talked about the community police and community engagement as being part of the support, there are some of the language that I heard sounded like support the police and not support law enforcement and community safety. So I just want us to be careful because I think there are folks who will want 365 support police and community. So we have a stronger pace. So I just urge us to think about the messaging.
Yeah.
Paul, let me jump in right quick. The foundation is totally separate, not related to the citizens police advisory.
I understand that. I understand that.
Okay.
I was just making that observation.
No. I'm saying that because we also are going to have this publicized on YouTube, and I just want to make sure it's crystal clear that the Citizens Police Advisory Council is not the police foundation. I simply asked Paul to share that interaction because Chief had briefly mentioned it or referred to it in his comments. And I wanted for everyone to know so that we would have total transparency here.
Right, and it is a separate 501c3, so it's not a government entity. There are no, this is it's going to be a private corporation, nonprofit. The chief did he talked about analytics, which is so boring, but needed. But the more fun thing for some of us old timers is one of the things we did talk about real quick was bringing back the horse patrol. That's never going to come out of his primary budget anymore with all the things that they need. And I think, those are community type things. And Jerry, I'm going to be reaching out to you for messaging for everything anyway. So, but I appreciate you raising both hands. Now you volunteered yourself. So I'm coming after you.
Thank you very much. Now for the agenda for next time, I made some notes. So I have the subcommittees reporting again, Policing 101 Academy, first or second quarter of 2021, Captain Thompson. I'll be looking to you for that to let us know. Okay, cool. And then the crime analysis unit, kind of sounded like David Crosby would be ready to come back and share some additional information with us then, possibility. David's got his mic off right now, but I'm sure when he.
Oh, I'm always available.
Okay. We'll see what additional progress has been able to be made. And then Chief, we mentioned the after action report and any other comments you'd want to share with us at that time as well.
Ma'am.
Council members, anything else? Did I leave anything off? Did I capture it right? Okay, so now what I have for us is our next meeting.
Dustin's got something.
Oh,
Juan,
I'm sorry.
Do you want Captain Cortella on the next call in February? Somebody mentioned earlier an update from him, a timeline from his subcommittee involvement.
Yes, that was a part. I think he would probably be at the next at that subcommittee's meeting.
I hope so.
Right, yeah, and so then when they do their subcommittee report, it'll probably dovetail right into Captain Cortella as well. And then Captain Bruder has been very dedicated and always supporting us, so I'm sure he'll be there too with us talking with the crime analysis unit again. Now, looking at the dates, we've been sticking with first Thursday of each month, every 2 months. So I have February the 4th would be the next time we would meet as CPAC. And then the next meeting after that would be April 1st. And that's not an April Fool's joke either. April 1st would be the meeting. Is that good for everyone? Same time, same station? Okay. You all please continue to have a safe time. Thank you so very much for your time this evening. We will not be talking with each other during the Christmas holiday unless your subcommittee is meeting. So please have a safe, enjoyable holiday and enjoy the season and make sure to stay safe and take care of each other. Take care and thanks again. Bethany, thank you so very much. And Wendy, you were quiet, but thank you. So with that said, our meeting is adjourned for tonight. Bye-bye, everybody.
Have a good weekend, everyone.